Hello, I'm Szczepanski, and you're watching The Capitol on Live One TV. Today, I'm joined by Rutherford Borough Council candidate, who is an environmentalist, an educator, and a mental health advocate. Jasmine Gray, thank you for joining us here on The Capitol.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's so good to see you again.
It's so good to see you again, too. So actually, where I had met Jasmine was last fall during a walkaway rally. Now, Jasmine, are you a walkaway yourself?
For the most part, yes. I grew up in a Republican household, and it wasn't until I went away to college that I started to identify more with the views of the Democrats. So I voted for Obama. And then it wasn't until 2008 and everything that was going on with the economy at the time that I started to realize certain things that didn't make sense. And I was never really big into politics at that time, but as the years progressed and I saw what was taking place all around me, I started to pull away from those views and slowly started making my way back to my Republican roots.
Jasmine, give us some backstory. Tell us about why you decided to run for Rutherford Borough Council.
So I was fighting an expansion in my town. And as I was fighting this expansion, I began to realize a couple things. Number one, everything starts at a local level. I don't think many people really see or understand the workings with local government, but it really does start at the absolute local level. With that fight, I also saw how important it was to use my voice, and that my voice was actually a really powerful tool. Before I knew it, during this long, arduous fight, more and more people, regardless of political affiliation, started to agree with me. At the end of the day, we all wanted what was right, and it was to stop this expansion.
Jasmine, what are some of the key components to your platform that you're an advocate for in running for councilwoman?
There's quite a few important areas that I'd like to target. Number one is redevelopment. Redevelopment is currently sweeping the state of New Jersey. We are seeing it being used and abused throughout the entire state, with more cases of eminent domain that is popping up, and that is basically that your private property can be seized if it is for the good of the public, basically. And we're seeing developers come into these municipalities, working with local government on securing areas for these redevelopment projects. We're seeing a lot of big structures, these pack and stack units that are popping up everywhere. That's currently taking place in my town. It's an issue that we've been battling for quite a few years. There was a redevelopment project probably about 2 years ago that I called out, Agnew Place, along with the candidates that were running for council at the time. Nobody believed us. Nobody believed us because they couldn't understand how a project of that scope and scale could pop up without any residents knowing about it. After the election, it came out that it was. And these are the types of things that I want to stop. So going with redevelopment, also transparency. We're seeing a lack of transparency in local government. Most of the things that I need to find out, I have to go Oprah at Borough Hall. It shouldn't be like that. It's all public information, and it should be readily available to the public.
Jasmine, I know one of the key things you are very passionate about is the environment. What in the community have you seen that has inspired you to be outspoken about environmental issues?
Well, I'm not sure if you're aware, but New Jersey is one of the most contaminated states in the whole entire nation. We have 114 Superfund sites, and New Jersey is also a densely populated state, meaning that everybody in the state of New Jersey currently lives near a Superfund site. Now, if you look at the studies, which I've poured through, the amount of diseases or disease clusters, I should say, that happen around these Superfund sites and landfills is staggering, absolutely staggering. Now, what we're having in my town, Rutherford's in the middle of 3 massive Superfund sites, massive. I think the EPA came in and said that it would cost $330 million to remediate. There's only one issue. There's no money in the Superfund site. So how are we going to ensure that these properties, which are currently being redeveloped, are clean enough for, somebody to work on, somebody to live in? Because most of these redevelopment projects that are taking place on contaminated land are mixed-use buildings. So if the EPA, if there's lack of oversight from the EPA and NJDEP, how are we going to ensure, public safety, public health? And that's one of the things that I really want to address, being that redevelopment is really taking over my town.
I remember when I was going through your campaign Facebook, I saw a picture of you on a railroad track. And earlier when we were talking about it, you said that there was a park right across from that and then right next to a contaminated field on the other side, and it was only this railroad track that kind of separated that. Can you expand more on that story?
Sure. So there's an area that's being developed they're going to make it a park. Now, what many don't know is the history of that land. There used to be a chemical factory. Nobody has remediated that property. And so they're in the process of making this piece of property, part of a park, but now you're going to disrupt soil. The only thing that is separating this children's park in my town, mind you, it's a special needs park, and this contaminated piece of property is a railroad track. Now, if you're going to bring bulldozers in and, disrupting this area, you're going to have contaminated soil blow over into our park and land on our, playground where children's play and, and climbing on top of the swings and everything with who knows what's in that soil. So I had brought up, do we know this piece of property has been fully remediated? Still cannot get a clear answer on that.
Wow.
And yet they want to develop that for public land use, which I'm not opposed to. I believe redevelopment is good, but responsible redevelopment. You're putting people's health at risk, and that is what I'm strongly against.
Absolutely. I think back to an earlier point that you made that people tend to vote on, the state or the national elections and have less of a focus maybe on the borough or the city council elections, when it really sounds that these are the elections that are going to be impacting people in their immediate day-to-day. They're right in their backyards or in their front yard.
Yeah.
Their soil that they literally walk across. What are the responsibilities of city and borough council that you would be taking on with the role?
So we would be voting. So Rutherford we follow a weak mayor strong council. So meaning we have 6 council members, 3-year terms, and the only time the mayor would vote is if there was a tie. So we would basically be voting on spending, and that's another issue. A major issue in Rutherford are the taxes. What are we spending our money on? I can tell you, because I had to Oprah that. We are spending frivolously, and one of the things I would like to do, if elected, is to really, focus on spending within our means. Why are we spending for things that we don't need to? Have our, council members done their due diligence and looked into federal resources that we can tap into? There's a ton of grants that we could look into for, services we could provide our community. One of the things that's lacking is, programs for those struggling with mental health. Being that we're in this state where we are today, it's really important. But it's also been a long-standing issue with where Rutherford has been lacking in recreational activities for our teens. Also, street projects for beautifying our downtown. Nobody has really, touched upon that. And so I would look into revitalizing our downtown and bringing it back to that splendor where it used to be, where restaurants were thriving. Even now, it's crumbling. It's sad to see my hometown really get to this state.
Jasmine, you're a former educator. In looking at the trends that our school systems are having, what kind of shifts have you observed?
Well,
for better or for worse?
For worse, I would say. So I've worked in education for 20 years, and I started to see the shift. It was a slow but gradual shift that went from individual learners to basically focusing on testing, standardized testing. What I saw, was that many of our students were falling behind because of so much emphasis being put into these state testing periods that our schools would go through. It really, I don't think that it's something that is necessary. I feel that, being a teacher, we do assessments all year long. So why are we putting so much emphasis and energy and money into preparing our students, who many developed, testing anxiety, when so much emphasis is being placed on these scores to really, predict their outcomes for the following year. So that to me was something that was very concerning. And when I started to work at an adult program for learners with autism, what I started to see is that we were getting more clients who were unable to request, let's say the restroom. However, that would not be a focus with some of our programming. We'd have to follow these certain guidelines, even though, it kind of hindered, the independence of our clients. But that's something that was very troubling to me. And I think I speak for a lot of teachers that our hands are tied, because it goes way above our heads, the district heads, and it goes all the way up to basically what the state mandates, which are these test scores.
Our students really are being put through so much, especially with the lockdowns and different restrictions as we navigate through this pandemic. What do you see as some of the long-term effects that students and children are going to have?
Issues of mental health. We're seeing it now. It's been a long-standing issue. In New Jersey, we're seeing a lot of stigma-free signs. However, what does that mean?
I was about to ask, what does stigma-free signs, what does
I
it
had
mean?
to look it up. I'm sure many people are familiar with it, but basically saying that we will not, discriminate against those, experiencing issues with mental health. Well, we should never do that. And this has been a long-standing issue. If you start looking at, let's say, addiction, we see those numbers increase, a steady increase. The trend is increasing yearly, but now with the pandemic, skyrocketed. We're seeing deaths by suicide skyrocketing, yet nobody's talking about it. Okay, so we're in the midst of a global pandemic, lockdown, and you can literally walk down the street and see the anxiety and fear in people's faces. But what are we doing to help these people out? What are we doing to offer and provide resources that can help these families pull through? Especially, with children who are not seeing their friends on a daily basis. We're seeing all these children struggling to learn, remotely through Zoom. What are we doing to provide for these families and offer assistance? How is a woman, let's say a single parent, who is working one or two jobs, supposed to help their child get through these anxieties along with remote learning, and get through their day? Are we offering services? Because I'm not seeing any, and nobody's talking about them either.
What resources are going to need to be put in place to address these issues?
I think offering more support groups, more support resources, counseling, especially as I mentioned, we're seeing a huge increase with addiction. Working with our law enforcement, I know I've spoken to several in my town who actually check up on a few people that they know that are having a really hard time. But basically working together to try to come up with counseling. Everyone's talking about, healthcare. Well, what about access to, services for families that are, struggling with addiction and mental health and things of that nature? So yeah, it's really, you need to work together as a community to address this, but yet there's still that stigma. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about heroin, the big H word. Nobody wants to talk about, let's talk about it. It's time to, move forward. If we want to heal, then let's talk about the things that we need to heal and how best to move forward.
Absolutely. I think too also, in terms of restrictions that are put on to our children, even the requirements for wearing masks in school, and do you feel that there's going to be any other psychological effects that our kids are going to be experiencing from these type of restrictions?
Absolutely. You're talking about children. So from a young age, They read people's expressions, they mimic. Now we have somebody walking down the street, with a mask. Yes, absolutely. I think that is not only, hindering a child's, growth, but also they're lacking social skills because they're not progressing and being able to see these expressions. Not to mention, how are you going to be able to see if a child is upset? You're not going to be able to, tend to that child. We're living in an age that's really going to be detrimental to our future. I'm seeing it, with young kids. My girlfriend's daughter, I asked her for a hug. She went to run and then she stopped. She's 5 years old. She stopped and she was looking around nervously. And that's just, it's sad. Yes, I'm saying that we need to be safe, but at the same time, we need to think about what is at stake in the long run. And we are looking at a huge population of, that's going to be battling mental health issues.
Do you think there's going to be a disproportionate effect to children who have special needs?
Yes. Oh, I'm already talking to, I've spoken to parents and they've seen such a jump in behavioral issues. We're seeing with special need population, I can say working with, the autism population that, this is a group that, needs structure, and so when their routine is disrupted, they begin to regress. And we're seeing a lot more, behavioral issues. But this also, with the state, there's a lack of resources to help parents who, are, like I said, who, are now home with their kids, especially adult clients who have no place else to go to. What are the resources to help them out? A couple of the clients that I had were very behavioral, and now they're in group homes. And there's been a higher incidence of group home abuse. It's really disheartening. We have a big mess in New Jersey, and there's a lot of things that we need to look into when it comes to the special needs population, especially with our fee-for-service and what is going to happen for when these guys, when they graduate. What are the services? Are there enough day programs? That's another issue. So these are all things that we need to really, figure out.
You've run for this office before in the past, so you have experience now in the campaign process. What advice do you have for people, where can people start? Because it's very inspiring to see you and others, as I've been interviewing, to having that calling for stepping up into public office, because it does require a special personality to persevere for everything that's going to come at you. But where does one even start when they want to run for office?
You know what? Stick to your beliefs. Do what's true to you. When I ran last year, I had a lot of people, that gave unsolicited advice, and I was, pulled in many different directions, but at the end of the day, you have to do what is good for you and stick with your guns and what you value. And with that, people will see your authenticity and they will support you. So.
Jasmine, we've covered your experience as an educator, the shifts that you've seen in the education system and with people, environmental issues that you're passionate about, and then also it's very clear how passionate you are about mental health advocacy. Are there any other subjects we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about with our viewers?
Yes, we need more women in office. We need more women in office. Let's go, ladies, come on. We definitely need more strong women to lead the way, to inspire others. We are living in, a tumultuous period. So we need some more shining stars to step right up and, really inspire everyone to, heal. Because we all really need to heal from this last year. And I think women, the future truly is, female. So it's time to move forward.
Absolutely. Jasmine, do you have any final words for our viewers, and where can people find you?
Yes, I think that, in the last year we've focused on our differences. It's time to stop focusing on differences and start focusing on common ground and what makes us similar to one another. It's really important for us to pull through and to pull together if we want to move forward and heal. So my goal for 2021 is to basically unify, despite parties, despite gender, race, forget all that. I'm done with the labels, but to really work with everyone and move forward to heal. And you can find me at Jasmine Gray for Rutherford Council, Facebook. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We hope this will help our viewers from New Jersey to stay informed and make the right decision for voting in the upcoming November 2021 Rutherford Borough Council elections. Jasmine, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Capitol.
Thank you so much for having me.